let's just jump right in. For years, this was the kind of story that you'd hear whispered about. The kind of thing that sounded so huge, so unbelievable, it was basically written off as pure paranoia.
I mean, really think about that for a second. We're not talking about targeting specific suspects. We're talking about collecting everything from everyone, all the time. The sheer scale of it just seemed impossible. And politically, in a democracy? No way. It was just unthinkable.
And, the arguments against it sounded completely reasonable. There's just too much data flowing around the world, right? How could anyone possibly capture all of it? And democracies just don't do that. They don't spy on their own people on a massive scale. Plus, and this was the big one, there was absolutely zero public evidence. It was so easy to just wave it away as a crazy fringe idea. Until, all of a sudden, it wasn't. And that brings us to the exact moment when the theory crashed headfirst into reality. A single event that completely redrew the map of what we all thought we knew about privacy, technology, and power. A guy working as a contractor deep inside the National Security Agency, the NSA, walked out with a massive cache of top-secret documents. See, he wasn't some outsider guessing what was going on. He was on the inside, an operator who'd seen the system firsthand, and he had the receipts. This quote just nails it. It perfectly captures the massive shift that happened overnight. The whole debate stopped being about whether mass surveillance could happen. The documents proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that it was happening. It was an established, fully funded, state-sanctioned institution. The theory became terrifyingly real. So, okay, how did this colossal machine actually work? How did they pull it off? Well, the technical details that came out were, honestly, breathtaking in their scope and ambition. It boiled down to three main collection points. First, they went straight to the source, tapping directly into the physical backbone of the internet itself, those huge undersea fiber optic cables that carry pretty much all global data. Second, they had a program called PRISM, which gave them access to data from the servers of all the major tech companies you use every day. And finally, they collected not just what you were saying, but all the data about what you were saying. And this right here is the most important part to understand. The popular misconception was that some spy was sitting there reading your personal emails. But that's not it at all. The real strategy was to just collect the entire haystack of global communications first, just suck it all up, and then, later, use incredibly powerful computers and algorithms to search for the needles, the potential threats. So that brings us to this crucial term, metadata. It's basically data about your data. Think of it like this. It's not the content of your phone call, but the record of who you called, when you called them, where you were when you made the call, and how long you talked. The NSA collected this on a massive, massive scale. And with enough metadata, you can paint an incredibly detailed picture of a person's life without ever reading a single text. Now you might be asking yourself, wait a minute, where were the checks and balances? How could this happen in a democracy? Well, what the Snowden documents revealed was that those controls were incredibly weak. The rules for targeting were super vague. A secret court that was supposed to provide oversight was basically just giving rubber stamp approvals. And if you weren't a US citizen, forget about it. You had pretty much zero protection. Which leads us to maybe the most important question of all. Why? Why on earth would anyone build a system like this? And the answer really comes down to a single catastrophic day. Before 9/11, the job of intelligence agencies was mostly about targeted surveillance, finding specific needles in the haystack. But after the attacks, those same agencies were slammed for failing to connect the dots, for missing clues they already had. That failure created this powerful, almost primal new mandate. The old way failed, so the new philosophy became simple and absolute. Collect it all. The entire institutional mindset shifted to this idea of zero misses. For an intelligence agency, the absolute worst-case scenario, the biggest failure imaginable, would be to let another attack happen. So the logical, if totally extreme solution was to make sure that no piece of data, no matter how tiny or random it seemed, was ever missed again. So what you had was a perfect storm. You had this intense political pressure from the top saying never again. You had this explosion in technology that for the first time made collecting everything seem possible. And you had a powerful organization's deep-seated need to protect itself from ever being blamed again. It wasn't one single evil plot. It was this convergence of incredibly powerful forces. So what happened after the world found out? Well, the legacy of this whole thing is incredibly complex and honestly, deeply contradictory. It left behind both really damaging consequences and, believe it or not, some unexpectedly positive ones. I mean,
On the one hand, the damage was obvious. The very idea that you could have a truly private digital conversation was pretty much shattered. Trust between allies was blown apart when it came out that even friendly leaders like Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel were being monitored. And of course, there's the chilling effect, that subtle fear that someone might be listening, which can make people hesitate to speak freely.
But here's the wild irony in all of this. The public backlash was so huge that it created an incredible demand for better security. Suddenly, things like secure HTTPS connections became the default for websites. End-to-end encrypted messaging apps like Signal went from being a niche tool for activists to something your parents use. And big tech companies were pushed to start publishing transparency reports, showing everyone how many government data requests they get. So, in a weird twist, the exposure of mass surveillance triggered a massive leap forward in personal digital security for everyone.
So, after all is said and done, what's the ultimate takeaway here? What is the real warning that this whole saga is trying to tell us about the future?
I think this comparison is really important. You can have a system of state control that's very open and oppressive, like in China, where everyone knows they're being watched. But the NSA model was different, and in some ways, trickier. It operated in secret, but under the cover of a legal framework, all within a democracy. Because it was hidden and justified by national security, it was much, much harder for the public to even know it existed, let alone debate it. And that really is the core lesson. The real danger here wasn't some shadowy villain in a dark room plotting to take over the world. It was a systemic failure. It was a situation where the speed of technology and the intense pressure for security just completely lapped our slow-moving systems of democratic oversight. The checks and balances just couldn't keep up. Which brings us right back to where we started. The NSA story isn't some crazy conspiracy theory precisely because it's so plausible. It's what happens when you get the right mix of powerful motives, incredible technology, and weak oversight. It's the most realistic and, because of that, the most frightening real-world example we have. And that leaves us with the one critical question that we have to deal with now. After 2013, the question is no longer, can this be done? We know the answer to that is yes. The real challenge, the question we all need to be asking, is whether our laws, our oversight, and our collective public will are strong enough to build a system that can actually stop it from happening again.